Hey everyone, this is Brian with Skipline. Hey, I just want to do a quick video to show you guys a little bit about the A through L connector on our Core Skipper and Core Hub products. Okay, so the A through L connector on either a Core Skipper or a Core Hub is a 12-pin connector, and it's actually the same connector that was used on SM5 products. So that means that if you are doing an SM5 retrofit, a lot of time you can actually take the existing connector with its wires already on it and plug it into one of our newer SC12 products. One minor change is sometimes there are clips that need to be removed from this connector if going from an SM5 to an SC12. So the A through L connector, previously A and B were where you wired power and ground. That's where you used to supply power on an SC12 system. That is no longer the case. You do not need to supply power or ground to this device. Now that being said, the B pin, which was where you supplied ground previously, is still tied to the SC12's network ground. That is still useful for connecting ground planes. Now, I'll talk about that in just a moment. But for the most part, A and B are irrelevant now, so you do not need anything connected there. C and D are reserved for pump stroke inputs, and those are NPN inputs. So we're looking for a ground pulse, a ground signal from a flow meter, pump stroke sensor, doesn't really matter. Pin E is attached to the ground plane, which we will get to. Pin F, as in Fox, that's giving you a clean 5-volt signal. So we've actually taken 12 volts, we've cleaned it up, we've made a reliable 5 volt for powering motion sensor and other sensors. Pin G, that is the motion sensor input. So that's where we're looking for ground pulses from your motion sensor. So just remember G for go. H and I are the same as C and D. They are extra pump stroke inputs, or we can use them for a variety of purposes, but they are looking for ground pulses once again. J is attached to the ground plane, just like B and E. And then K and L are pretty much they're auxiliary inputs. We often reserve L for your backup camera. Now the thing about that though is that's actually the exact opposite of the other inputs. The other inputs are all looking for ground pulses. L is looking for 12 volts. So it's easiest to use a backup signal or transmission reverse signal on the high side, and so that's why we're looking for 12 volts instead of ground. So if you do have the ability to connect to a transmission reverse signal, brake light, something like that, connect it to L, and that'll enable certain features. If you do have auto reverse carriage lift, that will enable that. It will also make your HDVO, DL18 or anything like that capable of acting as a backup camera. K can be either high or low, meaning it can either be configured to be a ground pulse input or a high side input, and that's going to just be dependent on your model and how we shipped it. Now let's go back to the ground plane that I keep talking about. B, E, and J, those three are all attached to the ground plane. We're supplying the whole network power and ground from an alternative source than we used to on the SM5. So that means you do not need to supply a ground. That being said, since we are attaching our network's ground to these pins, that means that you can use those pins to ground sensors, and that is highly recommended. Ground is a relative term, and so often with sensors, if you're not grounding the sensor using the same ground that we're on, we can basically be talking different languages. Where we think ground is 0.5 volts, in reality it's 0.8 volts. We want to make sure that we're talking the same language as your sensors. So I highly recommend that any motion sensors or pump stroke sensors are grounded using B, E, or J. The other thing you can do is, if you're using some of our advanced features in controlling proportional valves, electronic regulators, anything like that, even pressure transducers, you can still ground those devices using an alternative ground source, but then just run a piggyback wire from those ground sources to B, E, or J. Even if you're using some kind of flow meter that's maybe a 24 volt flow meter and you're using a step-up converter, use that step-up, the 24 volt ground, and tie it into this system. That way, ground is all spoken at the same level, same language, and it'll increase the accuracy and the reliability of your sensors. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.